My name is Noel Richardson. I'm a professor of physics and astronomy at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. The university started as an aviation and aerospace type college, and now we are much bigger and have a lot of focus on STEM. I am an astronomer and I study massive stars for my research. And then I also have a large number of students that work with me on this research. Okay, so kilonovas are pretty rare, but they're also pretty important. They're the events in space where we get heavy elements like gold that show up in the universe. And they're caused when we have two neutron stars, which are dead massive stars that already exploded in a supernova, and they're in an orbit around each other and they eventually merge. And we learned a lot about these back in 2017 when a project called LIGO, which studies gravitational waves, detected a very slow merger event that was not like the black hole events that they usually see, but a slower one from two neutron stars spiraling in. And at the time of that event, what we saw a gravitational wave where the two objects spiraled in together. And then a millisecond or two later, there was a burst of high energy radiation. Um, I think it was gamma rays or X rays that were detected. And this was seen with a satellite called SWIFT, which is a X ray satellite in orbit. And then they were able to find where this object was and study it across all wavelengths of light, from the X-rays through the radio, from the ground. And that's how we learned that these objects are what create the heavy elements like gold in our universe. So understanding how to get these objects is one of the problems that we've had up to now. Yeah, so we think that just with how other events in the universe work, we can piece together how different elements are made. And it turns out that you can't make much gold in a regular supernova, which you need something really energetic to get that heavy element beyond iron. Um, and so it turns out that the easiest way for this to happen is to send a bunch of material out into space with the merger of these two neutron stars. And once the event in 2017 was recorded with LIGO and across the electromagnetic spectrum, we were able to piece that together. So it is important, if we want to understand how we got to where we are today in the universe, to understand how these events work. One area that I really like is what's called interferometry. And interferometry can be done in multiple ways. They do this with LIGO, that's how they discovered gravitational waves. There's also a less worked with technique called optical infrared interferometry, which is where you have multiple telescopes laid out in a large configuration, and then you get all the light into a central lab. And when you do this, you are able to get to very, very high resolutions that you cannot reach with any other single type of telescope. So, for instance, I do this to map out orbits of massive stars because you can get 1,000 times better resolution than you can from the ground um, with an interferometer than you can with a regular telescope. And you can see two stars going around each other and measure their masses and how they evolve with time. And so some of my work that I'm doing now involves trying to peer into the physics of the systems at high angular resolution in order to get good images and understand how these things are working. I think most days, as a professor, I spend a fair bit of time working with students. I spend a fair bit of time teaching or getting my lectures ready. In the summer, I spend a lot more time doing research overall. Um, so your typical day is different based on the time of year, I think. Um, Certainly, there are certain times of year that are busier than others where you're trying to ask for time on a telescope and get that time awarded. So several astronomers put together over almost or about 1,600 proposals to use the new JWST this year. And I was one of them that was working on 5 or 6 different proposals with a bunch of different groups. And we were just trying to figure out the best ways in which we could use that telescope to better our science. And I think this is a standard for astronomers where there's different deadlines and everyone gets busy on working on that deadline and moving forward. If you're a student and you're interested in astronomy and you want to learn a little bit more about something, there are great resources available with the American Association of Variable Star Observers, the AAVSO. One of my best colleagues and co author on this article that I wrote about this Kilonova progenitor um, is a scientist at the AAVSO. And they work extremely hard, and they have been doing citizen science for over 100 years. And they work hard to keep a database of all these measurements of variable stars. You can contribute to science without any equipment other than your eye and help us understand how stars are changing, because oftentimes, especially the bright stars, are missed in a lot of surveys. So this is a fun way to get involved and understand something about the nature of how astronomy works um, at a young age. And I think that there's a lot of good resources there and webinars that you can attend that'll teach you even more about astronomy than you would get in a classroom. So I think that's some of the best advice I could give.